Welcome to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast, where we try to cut through the noise and help you make sense of the chaotic information space around us. I'm Griff Somke.
And I'm Jay McKenzie.
Today, we're very fortunate to have Southern Poverty Law Center senior investigative reporter Michael Edison Hayden with us again. Michael just finished covering the Douglass Mackey trial on charges of election interference, and he is joining us today to give us his perspective on that experience, as well as the general state of the extremist right after what was a seismic event for them. If you like what you're hearing, please give us a rating and a review on the app that you're listening on. Be sure to subscribe at didnothingwrongpod.com to get our content straight into your inbox. All of our work is free, but we're extremely grateful for paid subscriptions and donations that ensure that we can keep doing this important work. Thank you. Michael, it's great to have you back. Thank you so much for making the time and joining us. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to finally have an opportunity to talk to you guys. I've been wanting to for a while, but we needed a verdict among other things.
Oh, no kidding. This has been amazing to watch.
So, Mike, for the folks who haven't been as deep in the woods as we have, can you explain who Douglass Mackey is and what he's just been convicted on?
Yeah. Okay. So Douglass Mackey is a Middlebury graduate who was, as far as I could tell during the trial, basically unemployed during the 2016 election, and became heavily involved in promoting Trump online through a pseudonym known as Ricky Vaughn. Ricky Vaughn is, of course, the character from Major League, was it 1987 or 1989 film?
89.
89. So where Charlie Sheen played the archetype of the wild ninth inning closer. You know, his nickname was Wild Thing, and the idea was that he could throw like gas, he could throw 100 miles an hour, but he couldn't find the plate. And throughout the season, he became better and better, and actually kind of zeroed in on his command and control in a baseball sense, and was able to just strike people out at the end and became a great relief pitcher. So he had that persona, and he started using an avatar on Twitter of, Charlie Sheen's character's face, probably around 2014. And after Trump announced, he changed the, at the time it was Cleveland Indians, hat to a MAGA hat, and kind of skyrocketed on Twitter to becoming an extremely influential voice in the 2016 election. I think a very credible and serious MIT study had him ranked 107 on the top 150 influencers, and that became a big part of the thing in his trial. And essentially, Ricky Vaughn was praised by the radical right, including neo-Nazis at the time, for being able to kind of, on one hand, hold onto the fringe kind of anti-Semitic extremist corners of the right, as well as the more mainstream kind of bread and butter Republican voter, and kind of pull them together on Twitter. There's a weird way with the kind of articles and links he would share and the rhetoric he would use. He was able to kind of unite the right, which was, I think what his greatest asset to extremists is he was so good and so influential and so good at making their ideas palatable. He just became a huge star among extremists for that reason. And what is he charged with? It's election interference. He promoted two memes, is what the way they describe it. I would call it just like disinformation. They were carefully crafted to resemble Hillary Clinton campaign materials, and they told people to vote by text. And they specifically targeted women of color in the imagery. A Black woman in one image, and then the other one was a Latina woman, and her writing around her was in Spanish, telling people to vote by text. And 5,000 people texted that number. I've seen the right repeatedly point out that this happened much more frequently after the media had reported on this disinformation campaign, which is accurate. But two things that came up in trial that they are ignoring are that nearly 100 or roughly 100 people texted the number before the media covered it. And if you're injuring one person's vote, that's a crime. Yeah, roughly 100 people did. And also, the people who played a role in this conspiracy talked frequently about getting the media to sort of amplify their disinfo. So that's the long of it. And I'm sorry that was a while, but I hope that explains it.
Oh, definitely, definitely. And that kind of leads into the next question. Practically the entire MAGA right had an absolute meltdown about the verdict. They all seemed to be worried that they would be next. And based on Mackey's proximity to these people in 2016 and 2017, it seems like that fear might be warranted. Would you agree?
Let's put it this way. If this verdict had gone a different way, I think that they would feel a lot safer. I think we'll do it that way. We'll just position it that way. Like, what if he had been acquitted? Well, I think that would have helped set a precedent that like these kind of like social media based crimes, are really difficult to prove. And this is sort of like, it would have given them a lot more gray area and a lot, fuzzier legal precedent for prosecution to work. But now, if you think about all these disinformation campaigns that have demonstrably led to harm, right? Or if they're not disinformation, I know this is of interest to you guys, but like hack and leak influence campaigns, right? That's the other thing that was heavily used in 2016, 2017, right? Do you think things like Pizzagate, or you think things about like the Podesta emails, and you think about stuff like which by the way came up very heavily in this trial, the Macron leaks, for example, all these things. It's possible to look into these things and see harm being done. I mean, certainly in Pizzagate's case, you really don't need to look very hard. I mean, you have people traumatized from what happened there, like literally still going to therapy and whatever else. So yeah, I think it opens the door for a lot of different things. And not only that, the FBI's leading witness, their kind of star witness, is this Microchip guy, who I'm sure we'll get into. But he's been cooperating with the FBI since 2018, according to this. He's been working for the FBI, is the term that was repeatedly used.
Yeah, and we don't exactly know what ongoing cases there are and how he's helping. We don't really have any sort of details, but neither do they. So it's kind of an open question as to what comes next. But it does seem like you said, there is real harm. You look at how many people have died from COVID-19 who wouldn't have because they refused to get the vaccine. And it's hard to put the blame on any specific person, but you have all these people pushing out this junk on the internet, and it does cause harm. QAnon followers have gone down some really dark paths, and in those cases sometimes they end marriages or friendships.
Murders has led to murders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There's a question of whether, like, is it because people who are unstable, dangerous, maybe predisposed to be attracted to these kind of internet conspiracies, or is it because the conspiracies are taking people like this and pushing them over the edge? It's very difficult to find those lines.
Yeah, and the government really seemed to get a little creative with this case, and it was a pretty landmark decision, but they found a law they felt that they could enforce here, and they thought there was a crime committed, and I'm glad they're thinking outside the box, and hopefully they keep doing that, because we should prevent as much harm as possible.
Preventative too, right? Like, because it's like they've isolated this tactic as something that they're trying to do, and who's to stop someone from doing a similar, like, one of the reasons murder is illegal is because we don't want people murdering people anymore.
Yeah, right.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like they're probably trying to stop the murder. So like in 2024, I mean, it's the sort of, you got to look at it from the inverse. If this was said, there's no issue here, and you just carry on, who's to stop people from just creating false advertising, telling people to do something to their vote and causing them to throw away their vote?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that you had to draw a line and just to say, like, hold on a second, this, like, some of these other disinformation campaigns that these guys were creating at that time, those disinformation campaigns may be weird or bad, but they're speech, and it's up to the platforms to kind of police that. But this is a crime. You can't actually tell people, this is fraud.
Right.
Well, and if I understood this correctly, if people sent in a text to the number that they set up and that Mackey put out on this meme, they got an automated response, right? It appeared to be genuine. They made it look as real as they possibly could. Is that right?
As far as I know, no. I think what happened is that they just kind of pulled a short code together, and then the proprietor of the short code, who has a business that's related around short codes, took it and used it as a way to inform people that no, you couldn't actually vote this way. I think that's the response they were getting.
Okay.
So they basically cut it off before it got out of control.
Well, that's good, at least.
Yeah.
So for the government, the star witness was an anonymous troll who's been going by the screen name of Microchip. And this was his first time appearing in public. So what can you tell us about this guy?
Yeah. Well, why don't you guys, you should give a little preface about who he is, because I know you guys look at him for a long time. Right? I mean,
Yeah.
Going back to before I knew you.
Right.
Yeah, the old Gab days.
So what do you remember about him before I tell you what he was like?
Well,
And
he definitely portrayed himself as an absolute just genius alpha male bodybuilder, snorting rails of Adderall, coding apps, and just always the smartest guy in the room. Smarter than everyone else, would give people, diet advice and like lifting advice. And
he claimed to be pretty much in charge of every right-wing disinformation op around, right? He said it wasn't Russia, it was him. And QAnon wasn't this group over on 4chan, it was him. And he just essentially claimed to run the internet. And sometimes he definitely appeared to have some kind of role in these right-wing disinformation campaigns. Like if you looked at the attempts to make Antifa a terrorist organization, he was on top of that and spreading that far and wide. But yeah, I don't know that anyone has thrown as much shit at the wall as this guy has, but yeah, he's the ultimate chaos agent.
Yeah, so basically, like he used to have an avatar that was like a MAGA thing, like hat, and he was a kind of it showed a very mask alpha dude with an ice cream cone, and he kept appearing during the 2016 election, promoting things like the Podesta emails. That's where he became like really, really well known. And he would get banned, and then he would come back, and it was like he was some sort of magician. He would have the same follower account like within hours. Like it was wild. He would be generating like thousands and thousands of retweets. It was crazy. Like he was just like dominating Twitter, and like it didn't make any sense. Like nobody could really figure out what he was doing and how he was so successful. But we learned a little bit about it. And then he went, he kind of went to Gab for a bit and was on with the other extremists who were kicked off of things. And then he was brought on again without his being identified as the creator of QAnon in 2018 by Jack Posobiec, which turned out to be a lie. And Posobiec had him in there, I think, as a kind of a disinfo of the disinfo type thing, as a way to try to make it look like, this QAnon stuff was hurting Trump. And it was starting to make everything look unhinged.
It was one of the most bizarre interviews I've ever seen. It's so strange.
Yeah, and so on One American News Network, Posobiec had him on no face, voice distortion, and kind of had him talk through being the creator of QAnon to say that QAnon was fake and not good or whatever.
I also interviewed Microchip to hear his take on the why and the how he created Q.
With the QAnon stuff, this wasn't something that was, this is a hard one to explain because this wasn't something planned, like we just came together and said, this is our operation to take out something, right? It wasn't like that. This happened actually, I would say it's more of a mistake that it happened, right?
And it didn't work. It didn't really slow down QAnon. And of course, he was lying. He's kind of disappeared and come back repeatedly. A few of the big hashtags he got trending are things like a cruise sex scandal. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To get that just flying up the fucking up the trends on Twitter, just dominating, like woof. It just went up, and it was all these things that were targeted during the 2016 the primary against Cruz. He just flooded him with this info. I'm not exactly crying for Ted Cruz.
No, but I honestly don't think there were really any guardrails at Twitter for that at the time, and they probably had to start dealing with people manipulating the hashtags after that, because he was so good at kind of owning that conversation.
Yeah, he basically did that, and he would get suspended. And the only recourse they really had is like, hey, we got to suspend this guy, is doing something weird, and then he would come back, and he would have, it's like, wait a second, this guy just came back and he has 80,000 followers again. Like, what happened? Like that leads us up to the present day. He was in multiple direct messages groups with Ricky Vaughn, including Microchip, which is one that he kind of hosted, and then 2 versions of the Mad Men DM, and then it was called Mad Men, and then there was the War Room, which was started by a person who kind of cast a heavy shadow over this trial for me, that was never really discussed in any other way, the War Room DM, which is Jared Wyand, who I last knew about Jared Wyand, where he was on Gab and was making terroristic threats and then disappeared. And
when was that? How long ago was that?
It was around 2019 or 2020.
Okay. I had wondered what happened to him. I just hadn't seen him in forever.
Without getting too much into detail, I have been, contacted by people with authority asking questions about Jared Wyand around 2019 and 2020, asking me about his whereabouts and what I knew about him, and he disappeared. So
wow.
I'm very curious, I'm very curious to know what happened to Jared Wyand and why was he not charged in this? I mean, I don't know what kind of intelligence he's providing to people. I assume. I know that what he was talking about is that he had accrued a lot of guns, and he was getting more and more involved in the anti-Semitic conspiracy stuff. And he was kind of like, this is in the aftermath of Tree of Life, and then he just disappeared.
Yeah.
That's a little disturbing.
Never a good sign.
No.
Yeah.
Anyway, so yeah, Micro was in a bunch of these DMs, and he was kind of workshopping messaging with Ricky Vaughn and others in there, kind of figuring out ways to jack up hashtags, dominate hashtags on Twitter, and draw attention to the influence campaigns and disinformation campaigns that they were using to destroy Hillary Clinton, which is the way he basically described it.
Yeah, Microchip did bring that up, and I think you talked about it in the trial, that he wasn't as interested in helping Trump as he was in damaging Hillary Clinton. Do you buy that? I mean, do you think he's being honest there, or honest with himself?
I do think so. Yeah, I think so. I don't think he liked Trump so much as he liked him as a kind of vessel to destroy Hillary.
Sure.
I think he hated her for a number of reasons. I think there are genuine reasons to dislike Hillary Clinton.
Sure.
She represents a lot of the things that are unpalatable about, or I would say represents, but she can be easily built into a symbol of a lot of the things that, a lot of the mistakes that, I hate the word neoliberal, but like, I don't know what else to use, but like kind of the things that neoliberalism just did not cover properly in people's lives. I mean, like this kind of this wine and cheese elitism that neglected labor concerns for people and allowed like the kind of vast expansion of some of these tech companies to kind of just erode the middle class and all these other things that people feel all kinds of resentment for. She became like a very easy symbol of that because she's been a very successful politician in that sphere. I mean, there are reasons beyond also her foreign policy.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean,
that's a big one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I was thinking domestically, I mean, like little things like, nickel and diming the fucking minimum wage in that campaign. It was just say 15, man. You have to say 15 for people. I mean, people can't live on $12 an hour. Like stuff like that. Easy to understand why there was a resentment, and also the kind of thing where it felt like it was all about electing a woman and things like that. And that just really activated a lot of male supremacists and misogynists like Microchip to just want to destroy her, because it really wasn't about a campaign to help people. It was a lot of people interpreted it as a campaign to get her president. It was all about her. All the messaging was about her. The foreign policy stuff I'm not even going to get into. Obviously, that is a huge one. Long story short, I do believe that he's sincere. I think he wanted to destroy Hillary Clinton. And I think Trump was like, it didn't matter that he was like this boorish, like whatever else. They liked that in part because at the time he hadn't governed yet and hadn't embarrassed anybody. He was just like an insult comic from hell. And he was just destroying everybody that they didn't like, including, the Lindsey Graham type people who ended up becoming Trump suck-ups.
Right.
Yeah, they still hate Lindsey. They still
became like based, right? Like that for a while they were putting activated eyes on him.
But then he went the way of Jeff Sessions over there. The rhino returned.
I think he's sincere, and I think that a lot of the energy around MAGA in 2016, because it hadn't really hit the personality cult level in the way it did in the 2020 campaign. By then, it was just like it was all about Trumpism. He had won already. He had already defeated the evil liberals or whatever was in the minds of conservatives. So he became this like this outlaw hero and whatever else then. But at that time, when he was not expected to win by many people, I thought he was going to win, but many people did not think he was going to win. I think at that time, they really benefited from people just hating everything and just feeling the inevitability of Hillary winning. And, it was just like a lot of people just bought into it who were not even concerned about their material interests, but just kind of denying Hillary Clinton what she believed was rightfully hers.
Right, definitely. So, what was the vibe like in the courtroom during the trial?
Man. Like, really interesting throughout. The jury selection was really, really difficult, in part because they had to grill people on whether they could be unbiased and not allow their political views to shape the outcome of the campaign of the trial season. There you go. There's a Freudian slip. But yeah, I mean, and this was hard, and it's like Mackey deserved a fair trial. He did not need people in there who were going to go convict him for being for being a Trump supporter. So that is important. Similarly, if you have one person in there who is a Trump supporter who has had access to some of Tucker's rants, I mean, that's a no-go zone for the prosecutors. That would be a huge failure. So it was difficult, and it went on longer than they expected. I think it was 3 full days. And Frisch, his attorney, fought pretty hard to try to, maximize the number of white men that were on there, I think. And at one point accused the prosecution. I overheard him saying that, like, just like they're being prejudicial against in dismissing white men. And then the prosecutor Paulson responded to say there are many white men we feel comfortable, very comfortable on this jury. He said something like that. And ultimately, there were quite a few white men, made up at least a third. Then as for the trial itself, sober as trials go, a little disjointed because it had to be delayed twice because he pulled his what would have been his expert witness. Yeah, and then 2 major shifts in tone. The first is when Microchip showed up and it felt like a circus. Second shift is when the prosecutors cross-examined Mackey, and I felt palpable darkness kind of seep into the courtroom as they're just repeatedly reading his statements, which the kind of statements that somebody in my line of work are very familiar with, and really entry-level extremism for me. But we're just ugly to hear in the context of this courtroom surrounded by people who may not be exposed to it. I felt it was just ugly and awful, and it was quiet. It was of course quiet in court, but I could feel the silence in a different way.
Right.
Yeah. Was it that the judge had to be told what a shit lib was at one point? I believe that was.
Yeah. There's some wild things like that. At one point, the Judge Donnelly said, so this Microsoft that's coming in, she referred to him as Microsoft. She said, I'm sorry, can you tell us what JFC means? I said, ma'am, it means Jesus. And she goes, okay. And then we had to over here, like Frisch was trying very, very hard to get things thrown out as being incendiary. It's very difficult because it was everything that was said in the alt-right movement at that time was incendiary, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
This is really, really, this is tough, right? I mean, like everything, the very nature of what they're doing is incendiary, right? They're trying to install a fascist state in the a fascist government in the United States, and they almost succeeded. And yes, I am aware of the things that we're already living under, whatever. Okay, I'm not going to go and get into that. But in reality, like we're talking about a right-wing, autocratic, anti-democracy movement taking power. That's what I'm referring to here. And they're getting very close. That in itself, that very mission is incendiary. So it becomes really difficult to get stuff into the trial. And one of the things that he tried to get out was the word cuck, where they're talking about this woman whose marriage fell apart, and they're laughing at her and be like, oh, she got e-cucked by a Charlie Sheen avatar.
They are so obsessed with that word.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my God. Yeah.
They're quite obsessed with that word in a way that makes me highly suspicious of what their online pornography intake is like. But yeah, they like it. So
yeah. So did Mackey ever acknowledge you at the trial, or either in the court or outside?
He did. I had chatted with Mackey on Gab, back in the day, and as I posted about in my newsletter, he was much nicer to me than many of the people on Gab, because Gab was Gab is kind of like prison to begin with, right? There's all these people who've been thrown out of mainstream sites that are in there, and it's kind of like, it's like being in jail. And the more sensitive you are in that environment, the more you're likely to gravitate to me. And I do think there's some sensitivity in Mackey, despite his absolutely fucked up behavior. And he was friendly. I mean, he was saying racist things to me, but he was, we were chatting things up. But there's a person in there, and obviously I'm trying to talk to him as a source, trying to see what I can, what kind of stories I can build, and also, I'm always trying to get people to, while I'm doing that, to think twice about what they're doing and maybe consider taking the steps towards leaving, right? So I'm always thinking about that, because I don't, one of the reasons I do this is because I don't want this to happen anymore, right? So I want this to stop. This fascist shit, I want it to stop. So I've got one eye on getting stories that damage the movement, and I've got another eye on trying to help people leave it. And we talked. And then when I saw him in the courtroom, I could feel that he recognized me, but, I don't know how long it took. And, the first time we were in the bathroom together, and, apologize to folks who do not go to men's rooms, but I was in the urinals peeing, and he went around and went into the toilet area to pee, which is I was like, okay, he really wants to avoid me, which I understand. And so then the next time I saw him, he was pacing around the court area, and I said, "Hey, Ricky," like that. And he waved and smiled. Because I said Ricky on purpose, because I wanted to refer to the conversations we had when I knew him as Ricky. And then, I saw him, he waved and smiled to me, acknowledged me. A couple days, when his spirits were a little bit higher, it really did look like for a moment during the 4 days of deliberation that he could get off on a mistrial. At least temporarily. The prosecution probably would have done it again, but his spirits were up because they were deadlocked for consecutive days, and at that time he stopped and waved to me. And yeah, I mean, since that time, he reached out to me to tell me that in the article that we published, that one of the Ricky Vaughn screenshots I used was not the Ricky Vaughn at that time. So I removed it. Yeah, I removed it for him. It was the one where there was a comment about Charlottesville. I don't know if he's telling the truth or not, but I wanted to remove it for him. The guy's, he says it's not his. So
was it
no, it's at Ricky Vaughn too.
Okay. So he's saying somebody else made that account and he wasn't running it, which it was oftentimes, this is the part of the issue here. You lose that many accounts that frequently, and then imitators pop up, and it's not always clear who's running it, who isn't running it. And when you're an anonymous troll on Twitter, it's that much more difficult.
Of course. I mean, it wasn't it was not a big part of the story by any means.
Right.
It was just an image example of it. Two, I mean, if I wanted to just find something that I know he definitely published that was shitty, I could just go back and find a million things because he said so many things, right? So it was just sort of like, okay, if you're saying that wasn't you, it wasn't you. He said it was, read the indictment is what he said to me. It's not in there. So it's possible that he's telling the truth. And it's also possible that it's not in the indictment and he doesn't want to draw additional attention to other accounts the prosecution was not aware of. So I don't know, but I want to give him the benefit of the doubt there. And so I removed it, but he was pleasant. And when he asked me to do that, and I responded right away because I'm not interested in, I could say like, do some extra reporting there or whatever. I'm not interested in that in this point. I think the case is pretty clear that he's a radical right figure who is, was deep in the extremist movement at that time. So those are my interactions with him.
So back to Microchip for 1 second. Can you explain, if he was supposed to be an anonymous witness, why you guys were able to see his face and hear his voice? It seemed like the prosecution made no real effort to hide that from the people in the courtroom, and what gives?
Well, they protected his name, and I think the understanding was that Microchip is very afraid of getting doxxed.
Mm-hmm.
That's his words. Now, I was very irritated that both the prosecution and the defense seemed to give credence to the word dox, conflating reporting with doxing.
Right.
That happened at several occasions. Like the reporting out, for instance, Mackey's identity was him being doxed. That's not true. That's reporting. If somebody is wearing a fucking Jason mask and shooting people and you find out who they are underneath it, that's not doxing. That's reporting.
Right.
Okay. So doxing is when you maliciously publish people's private information online with the purpose of creating harm for them. I've been doxed, and I'm not a pseudonymous figure.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We've been there.
We've both dealt with the same. It's part of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that's what doxing is, and I was a little irritated at the trial that got, that was entertained. But yeah, the idea is basically, I think Microchip knows that Luke has got a pretty strong peg on his identity, and he doesn't want it to be reported out. And I think deep down, I think he's got a business as a developer, as an app developer, or whatever it is that he does, something in the tech field. And I think if who he was exposed, it might impact his business. And I don't think he wants that to happen. So there's a number of things at play there, I guess.
Yeah, since you brought up Luke O'Brien, I wanted to ask you that Jack Posobiec claimed that Luke was, quote, nearly thrown out of court, unquote, by the judge. But it will shock our listeners to learn there are multiple people who dispute this claim. So what was Posobiec up to here, and why did this trial seem to make him so nervous?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is Posobiec has called Microchip a friend, literally.
Yeah.
Microchip has told me in private that Jack Posobiec is my friend. And I believe at one point he also messaged me and said, lay off of Jack, he's a good guy. About him. So, that's a problem because Microchip has been, unless Jack Posobiec is himself also, working for the FBI, which, by the way, I'm not putting it past anything.
No.
But then if that's the case, it's a huge, that is a huge dark mark on our government, if that were the case.
Yeah. I've had the same thought, and I hope not, but who knows?
Right.
Yeah.
It's like the end of Dirty Harry or whatever, where he throws the badge away. I don't think I could work for SPLC anymore if I found out that Jack Posobiec is working for the FBI for the whole time. It would just be.
So gross.
It would be the digital equivalent of Whitey Bulger, basically, is what we're talking about. Yeah.
It'd be so bad. Yeah, he's a longtime collaborator with Microchip. He was friends with them since the 2016 election, and he, like Mackey, is involved in a number of disinfo campaigns that also involve Microchip. And I'm sure if they were building a case against Jack Posobiec, for instance, I don't know that they are. But if he were involved in a case or involved in a different conspiracy or whatever, Microchip would have the goods on that. And we know that Jack is heavily involved in pushing. I don't know of anything that reaches to the level of a crime or not, but he was involved, for instance, in Macron leaks and hyping Macron leaks. There have been 6 charges against Russian intelligence figures for that hack and leak campaign. Posobiec was the primary person pushing that, et cetera. Again, no proof of anything that he's done that would rise to the level of a crime. I have none of that. I'm not, I want to be very clear that I'm not saying that he has committed a crime. I don't know that. I don't know anything, I have no reason to believe it. Let's put it that way. But I do know that everybody, like 6 people involved in Macron Links when she hyped, charges were brought upon them, all from the GRU. Then you have Bannon, who's been in and out of legal trouble, is basically one of his mentors. Roger Stone, who's always in legal trouble. I mean, like everybody in Jack's circle has been in some kind of trouble or other. And then you have this guy here who is like been informing to the FBI since 2018. I'm sure he's whether he's done anything wrong or not, I'm sure he's nervous. At least I would be, certainly if I was, if I were friends with Microchip and doing this pro-Trump activism, particularly in this atmosphere where it looks like people are starting to get punished for it. So, yeah, I mean, basically what Posobiec is referring to there regarding Luke, who is a wonderful journalist and a dear friend, is the fact that when Microchip came into the court, we had never seen this guy, but we had been chatting with him, Luke and I, for years, like going back years. And I think Luke even more than me, just forever, just talking to him. Usually these kind of interesting chats, like he's a smart guy. And when I say interesting, I mean, it's contentious. It's like bang, bang, bang. It's like shit posting in high speed when you talk to him. It's basically like insults back and forth, back and forth. But there's a kind of, he provides a level of mutual, I don't know, like there's a kind of, like he makes it fun in the sense that he's always escalating, making fun of you and inviting you to make fun of him.
Well, he's got a belief system or set or ideas that are more than just shit posting and trolling, which he obviously does. We obviously don't agree with the things that he believes and adheres to and all this, but he's not your average troll. He thinks he's onto something. He thinks he knows better than you, and it's at least his IQ is not as low as the common 4chan troll. I guess we can put it that way.
No, he's definitely a smart guy.
Yeah, and so we've been chatting with him for so long, and we had never seen him in person. And then all of a sudden, he comes in. Now, Luke, I think, had an idea who he was beforehand. I mean, he's been working on him for a long time, and I think what he saw confirmed it. But this mountain of a man, like, it's not a body shaming thing when I say this, I mean, but he is extremely fat. It's not like obesity. He looks also extremely solid. Like, if you don't like Kingpin or from Marvel Comics or like the Blob from Marvel Comics, like it's like, there's just a solid, gigantic figure comes into court, and he's wearing this like really vibrant blue hoodie. And he's got the neck beard and the hair stringing back like this. And we turn up and look at him, and he immediately starts laughing, like, because he recognizes us in court. And then I started laughing too, because it was just insane. It's like, here's Microchip. Yeah. And he comes and he sits down on the stand, like, in the box, and the prosecution starts asking him questions. And he gives these like kind of laconic, short answers. And, the timing is as funny as a shitpost. And because he's, in a court and he's not being racist, anti-Semitic, bigoted or whatever, anything else, you can't help but laugh because the timing, the way he does things and the style of humor is so honed by years of on the internet. Like he thinks things like, say, he's like, okay, and what is 4chan? He's like, it's a place where internet intellectuals go to talk about contemporary events. It's like, and the way I'm not saying, he said it so quickly, and so with his timing was so good that like it was difficult not to laugh. And then he was from the stand. They call a sidebar, and like to the stand, he's looking at me and he's looking at Luke, and he just starts laughing, and he has to takes his hoodie. And he puts it up over it, like the cloth of it over his mouth, and closes his eyes on the stand and leans back and just starts laughing into it. And I just lost it. I was laughing so hard. And Luke got up and changed seats to get a better look at him directly, which caused, I think, Microchip to react even more, more visually. And then Judge Donnelly basically gave a warning to say, she blamed Luke, but I think she was talking to multiple journalists there, including somebody who was reporting for Unicorn Riot. These are people who knew Microchip for years and were finally seeing him, and was like, we can't have any of this, or someone's going to get, thrown out or whatever. So I was really scared because I did not want to lose the story. And I, things had been going so well. And I just took my COVID mask and I just put it on throughout the testimony because I did not want to be seen smirking or laughing while he was on the stand. And there was during his cross, it got even funnier because Frisch's tactic, and it almost may have worked. I mean, it was actually Frisch at his most effective on Mackey's case because he was like, he started to go through the insane shit that Microchip had said to try to make him look unhinged, and it was not difficult. Like, so he, at one point he said, Mr. Frisch, I offer S. Any objection? Prosecution. No objection. The court, all right, that will be in evidence. This is in reference to one of his Twitter bios. It says, I drink Black Rifle coffee, wear a fishnet trucker hat, have a Jesus tattoo, and inject testosterone, period. George Santos and John Kirby Stan account. Period.
Sorry.
Pro balloon. Now, this is being read in court. Now, I am being asked not to laugh. I wanted to repeat it one more time.
It's so many memes.
Drink Black Rifle coffee, wear a fishnet trucker hat, have a Jesus tattoo, and inject testosterone. George Santos and John Kirby Stan account, pro balloon. Did you write that? Yeah, I did. By the way, Stan is a modern slang word for being a fan of. Is that fair? Big fan of those two, yeah.
And that's the most recent Microchip.
Oh, they could have, man.
I was fucking crying, man. I was crying, and I had to cover my face, and we were being told not to laugh. So it's like, how am I not supposed to laugh? Tell me that isn't funny. That's really funny.
Yeah.
I hope your listeners are. I've been on this like podcast for a while now, so like I hope people are still following this. So I got one more.
Please keep going.
Keep going.
Fine.
This is amazing.
The 5 people who get it are just loving it. So it's
Okay, here we go. Frisch, do you recall saying that you also used a testosterone steroid called Testogel? Testogel, yeah, that was like 2001. Yep. Did you tweet about your use of Adderall on February 20th, 2023? Yes. Frisch, let me show you what I will mark for identification as Exhibit R. Let me get it nice and focused. Right. Mr. Frisch, take a second. Witness. Oh, I already know this tweet. Did you tweet this? I did tweet that. Mr. Frisch, I offer R, defense R. Any objection? Mr. Galata, I don't see its relevance just from reading the tweet, so I object. Witness, this is a court. Hold on. Objection overruled. Did you say in this tweet, I'm now 36 hours into my Adderall and Chat GPT marathon? Did you say that? I did. Do you know what Chat GPT is? I do. What is it? It's a generative AI, a generative artificial intelligence using a language model. Let me show you what I've marked for identification as defense S. Wait. Oh, I'm sorry. Not yet. You have to wait. I'm sorry. It's good. It's good. Go ahead. Mr. Frisch. I like the old way where I walk up and back. I make fewer mistakes. Can you put it up, Donna? Okay. Do you recognize this one? I do. Did you tweet this one? I didn't tweet that. That's my profile. That's your profile? I offer S. And that's where we got to the Black Rifle coffee thing.
He had a lot of fun with this, didn't he? God.
Fun, but it was also, a bunch of stuff was stricken from the record here, but it was funny.
Why were they asking him about all this? Just to
one more, and then we'll let because they're trying to show that he was an unreliable narrator, that he was an unreliable witness, and he came pretty close because his tweets are so fucking bananas.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any objection to this, Mr. Gall? Again, I object to its relevance. I don't see the relevance. Court, I don't see the relevance. I would like to approach on this. All right, let's do the court. Sidebar conference. Mr. Chip has decimated a number of tweets where he says, I have the crazy, has decimated? I think we got the word wrong. Where he says, quote, I have the crazy. I'm on a schizophrenic rant. My IQ is so high now, you have no idea. And the last one is a doozy. Court, may I see it? Yes. I'm sure they've seen it. No, they haven't. I have to be able to use these, Frisch says. It's a fair game. It's fair game if he wants to say he's joking. I'll permit it. Mr. Paulson, it's fine. Court, the objection is overruled. Thank you, Judge. So in this one, Christina Benton says, recovery from mental illness and other types of disorders is possible through self-determination when you learn how to manage your symptoms, when you choose not to let them interfere with leading a fulfilling life. Many teens and young adults who are often just anxious. You respond, I have the crazy. Thanks for your post. Did you say that? I did. This is one just for the witness. You don't object to this, do you? Mr. Galata, no, Your Honor. So this is an evidence. What is the letter? Frisch Defense X. Do you recognize this one? This is February 13th, 2023. You say 3,109 crazy tweets over 2 weeks. What can I say? I'm insane, on pills. I don't shower. I can barely take care of myself. I hear voices, talk to the walls, and can predict the future. Did you say that? You did. We can go on forever with this, but I was being asked not to laugh, and it was very, very challenging.
I bet.
That is fucking funny.
Yeah.
I mean, we need to be clear. He's a virulent misogynist. He's an anti-Semite. He's promoted Atomwaffen division. However, it is very difficult to hear this in a court of law where you're not supposed to disrupt or laugh and hear 3,109 crazy tweets in 2 weeks. What can I say? I'm insane. Like, I mean, it's difficult in that context not to laugh.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
But then he came back and said, Ricky is not funny, which...
Oh, yeah.
Ouch.
Brutal. Frisch's attacks on him, I think, were the most effective the defense had been, because although I happen to be able to, because I know this world so well, parse out what's real and what's not, and the fact that people like this are also able to break the law consciously and whatever else, because I know as I talk to them. If you have no idea what even like how Twitter works, which some of these jurors are senior citizens, and you hear like somebody come in and they're like talking like this and about how they're insane and on pills or whatever, it really undercuts, could potentially undercut your ability to take them seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think that Frisch was very effective in this moment. This is the one time that I felt Frisch had put some doubt into folks because Microchip is just, he is what he is. He's just kind of presents himself as a crazy person.
Yeah.
That's not defamatory because he literally says, I am crazy.
Mm-hmm. I have the crazy.
Funny way to describe being crazy, but
This feels as inside baseball as you can get, trying to decipher him and what he means versus what he really means and what he's trying to gain and all these things. Yeah. But to the average person,
yeah, it's really tough. As that stuff we were talking about with Pazovic before and things like that, him being his friend and all those things. I would imagine if you're friends with Microchip and you've been kind of working with him on disinfo and stuff like that, to have him up there, that's got to be nerve wracking. And if I were a collaborator of Microchip, I would want to see any attempt to bring this guy onto the stand fail. I definitely would. Yeah, and the right made a lot of accusations here about disruption and witness intimidation, all kinds of other unfounded things about Luke, which were really unfortunate and sad. And Luke is, one of the best reporters on this beat and does not get the credit he deserves.
You're doing something right when Tucker Carlson won't even say your name, instead referring to you as, quote, the Southern Poverty Law Center's hatchet man, unquote, and, quote, the Southern Poverty Law Center's goon, unquote.
Yesterday, a hatchet man with the Southern Poverty Law Center, an organization that currently employs at least one suspected domestic terrorist who was recently arrested, reached out to a defense expert witness called George Hawley. The Southern Poverty Law Center's goon also obtained Hawley's private emails and questioned him about them. He threatened to write an article about Hawley and asked Hawley if his employer was aware that he was a witness in this case.
No, and really the right's scared of him. Mm-hmm. And scared of you. Your reporting and what you might reveal, and because they don't want consequences.
They don't want consequences. I agree. But also, I do think Luke has become, in my case, they've come after me quite badly and whatever. But in Luke's case, I feel like it has gone. It went. I mean, the day of the brick stuff. Do you remember that shit? That's 2018, where they, there's a kid, a journalist in the face with a brick. That fucking campaign. I mean, that was really centered around Luke, and he's a really tough guy and can handle this stuff, and he can handle it. But I mean, they have targeted him and tried to portray him as unhinged and crazy and whatever else for years. And, this is just an extension of that. And Posobiec is not an honest broker. I mean, he has a history of lying and manipulation. It's actually a miracle that he's made it as far as he has in life, given, how many times he's worked with people who are unsavory, or he has just provably lied. But he's just lying again here. And yeah, I mean, was Luke like almost thrown out of court? Like, that part of it is not necessarily false because the courtroom environment was kind of nuts. But the warning, it's just not an accurate portrayal of what Luke did there. He didn't it was more than just, it was a circus. Microchip couldn't control himself and everybody watching it was laughing. The jury was laughing.
Yeah. So I don't know if you need to go soon, but I
can answer one more.
Okay. I wanted to talk to you about the Manhattan protests, but we just got so focused on this.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, we can talk about that briefly.
Yeah, well, you had Jack Posobiec, you had the New York Young Republican Club, you had MTG and all these people outside the Manhattan courtroom and supporting Trump, and they put out a video, they had these pictures surrounded by supporters. But you were there. How many people were actually there to support Trump? And how much of this was just the press and just random people kind of gawking and watching? Was it a big pro-Trump event, or was it just these people kind of shouting in a crowded square?
Well, I contend that the MAGA movement, it's now unraveling, and I don't want to spike a football to say, yay or whatever. I don't want it to unravel because of the indictments and things like that. I want it to unravel because it becomes so unpalatable and unpopular. Because I think the Bragg thing can fall short. I think there's a lot of, concern. I have a lot of concerns that it may be too thin, for instance. I mean, and I'm worried that if he gets off, then it'll only further empower Trump with his base. So, no one's spiking a football just yet. But for people who are not familiar with the New York Young Republicans Club, this is a kind of a hard right anti-democracy club, basically, that is, or has become that under Gavin Wax's leadership, who's the president of them right now, and the executive secretary is this kind of dude named Vish Burra, who is an aide to George Santos. We reported on them in December. They had all kinds of radical right figures in Europe who kind of came down and were congregating with Posobiec speaking and Marjorie Taylor Greene speaking, and Santos was there. It's just a hard right anti-democracy kind of thing. Steve Bannon was there, and Steve Bannon's fingerprints, his network, is kind of overlaps very heavily with these guys. So when they gave their thing, they had to go back to the well with the same speakers as always, which is Marjorie Taylor Greene and Jack Posobiec, which is, you get diminishing returns for that after a while, where it's just kind of we got the same guests over and over again. And, I didn't see more than a few dozen people that were really eagerly there for them and their event. There were a lot of pro-Trump people there just for Trump, but I think it was overshadowed by media and anti-Trump people. It's Manhattan, it's lower Manhattan. And things really thinned out after Marjorie Taylor Greene left. They basically, protesters stalked her car, they stalked her from her car. She was leaving. Michael Rappaport yelled all kinds of, called her an animal and a racist and stuff. He posted that to social media of him harassing her, with these comments. And basically what I saw there is the MAGA movement kind of unraveling. I mean, they got Marjorie Taylor Greene first, a sort of a reversal of a festival lineup speaker, where the speakers got smaller and smaller. And so Marjorie Taylor Greene, no one could hear a word of what she was saying. People were blowing whistles to drown her out. You couldn't hear anything. I had to actually take her social media person's clip in order to figure out what she's saying afterwards to report it, because I couldn't understand anything. There's just whistles just drowning her out. Then Posobiec gets up there afterwards and everything thinned out. Like nobody was there to see Posobiec except this dude who had like a big red face and like was just shouting and wearing aviator glasses. I was like, oh, okay, so this is the real Bumble Jack fan. This is like this one guy who's just like, this is not a lot of people. It's not a lot of adulation for Jack. I just didn't see many people who cared that he was there, which was amusing. And he's there with his warfare pin and his sunglasses, trying to look cool. He gives this speech. It was really flat and stupid. And then from there, every speech got weirder and weirder to me. This Miles Guo thing, right? He's the Chinese tycoon who is really big on pushing this anti-Chinese rhetoric. Look, once again, I have to add as a caveat, like there's a lot of reasons to be skeptical of Chinese influence campaigns and like what they may be trying to do to the U.S. I mean, like, of course, you'd be naive to think that the Chinese wouldn't do things to the United States. Just as we're not, of course, we are probably trying to do all kinds of things to the Chinese to try to get our influence in. But this stuff is filtering into War Room and all these Steve Bannon's War Room and all these other things. Posobiec has been a sort of pushing these anti-Chinese conspiracy theories. And it just devolved into people shrieking about comparing Trump to Miles Guo and who got busted for fraud charges earlier in March, and saying that the Chinese Communist Party had infiltrated our judicial system and was carrying out prosecutions of Trump and other figures. It got super weird. And as it went along, fewer and fewer people seemed to be there responding to it. And I said, my God, man, this is like late MAGA,
Yeah.
I mean, this is late MAGA is what this is. This is like, whoa. It was, for people who are not crazy about, your listeners who may not be crazy about Jack Posobiec, this was cringe for him, man. I mean, this is just,
yeah.
He left pretty like abruptly and just disappeared. He seemed to recognize me because I kept looking at him. I was wearing my mask, and then when he saw me, I smiled and nodded at him, and he pretended to laugh or laughed. I don't know. And he left pretty soon after that and just disappeared into the crowd and went. I mean, it was cringe.
Yeah.
It was cringe, dude. It's not only like, it was just like, I mean, you've seen the clips I shared, whatever. It was just like people, just these totally bizarre rants about Miles Guo that nobody understands. Like, I'm sure most of your listeners don't even know who that is. And then at the end of it, people just going, USA at the end, like in this really, what is the target audience for that?
Mr. Miles Guo, the leader and the founder of the new federal state of China, he dropped a bombshell 2 years ago. Remember, 2 years ago, he warned the America that the CCP will do everything to stop President Trump from its 2024 presidential bid. So this whole Trump's indictment was orchestrated and planned by the Chinese Communist Party. So this country's justice system has been weaponized by the CCP. American politics has become a one-party game by the CCP. If we don't stop the CCP will determine who will be the next U.S. president. America is now the communist country. We need to save this country now.
Amen. Do you think the majority justice system has been hijacked by communist regimes?
Yes.
That's what's happened here.
And that's why they arrested Miles Guo and jailed him. Today, Mr. Miles Guo's bond hearing is to be held right across from the street. They let all the criminals in New York walking the street free, but they denied Miles Guo's bail request. What kind of a two-tiered justice system in this country? This is a CCP country.
Yeah, it's a weird situation that they've got going with that. It almost seems, again, like that content is being created for an audience that just isn't this content at all.
Yeah, but it does feel like they're chasing the content with no clear direction, but their interest in winning elections is like a distant.
Right. They want to have this content out, and they're less concerned with how effective this might be for who their voters are, and it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense unless the content is created for people. I mean, again, shades of Alex Ionov on this one.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have some content for some people who are watching this to look like there's big protests against this system in the United States. And it doesn't matter that it's like 10 or 15 of Miles Go's paid shills.
Well, that's the thing I was going to say and bring up, though. The way that they're talking about the Chinese Communist Party at this point, they sound like neo-Nazis talking about Jews or talking about Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Except they've transferred that rhetoric and replaced the Jews with the Chinese or the Chinese government.
It doesn't serve anybody's interests but the party, I don't think. The only people I see getting out of this, is the CCP.
Yeah. You make the dissidents look crazy by association because here are these crazy lunatics with all these conspiracy theories. Yeah.
And now, I mean, as an extension of that, Trump is relying on Bumblejack and now like Laura Loomer.
Laura Loomer.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just nuts, dude. I mean, this is like they're really, like I said, late MAGA. It's not good.
And he's probably still going to win the primary. All the polling right now, at least, suggests Trump's going to win the primary. But the idea that he can win a general election, how? And I don't think they know, and I don't think they have any plan, but they're just full steam ahead with this, and it goes where it goes.
Yeah. If he's one of two nominees, he has a chance to win.
Yeah, and Biden is 81 years old, or going to be 81 years old, and none of us live forever. So it is still scary.
You can't take anything for granted.
He is, and I haven't really, kind of gone deep on the Kamala Harris situation to find out exactly how dire it is. But my impression is that she would be a very weak candidate to try to beat him as of right now, given the fact that her negatives are probably pretty strong.
Yeah,
that makes me nervous. It's not my job. I'm not a part of the Democratic Party. Just thinking about who might be a type of person who could beat him solidly. I always thought, Gretchen Whitmer would be the type of person who is in the right age profile. Yeah, and also she's in a state with a lot of working class people that is also, tends to be sort of run purple and has been popular. And I think she could handle a campaign. And I think they would probably make the campaign around her like focused on like the FBI things or whatever. That I don't think they get much juice out of that. Of course, we can't underestimate like how much misogyny is out there and how much resentment for women there is, even among other women sometimes. So I don't know how that'll play out, but there's no reason to stop from bringing somebody like that to giving them the chance. Now, I'm not saying that I'm just speaking not in my capacity as an investigative reporter or even a spokesperson, but I'm just trying to figure out like what would be the alternative to Biden. And she's one of the people I do that come to mind because I just, again, have not vetted her. It's not even a question of what her policies are. I'm just talking about the optics of who might be a good foil for the Republicans right now.
Yeah, I'm with you, though. It's not clear if it's not Biden. Harris did not do well in the primary.
No.
And it's not clear she could beat Trump. It's not clear who else it would be. And that is concerning.
It is.
That's where we're at. And we have to be realistic and prepare and have contingencies in place, hopefully, because if somehow Trump does win, it's going to be very dark.
Indeed.
It's going to be very dark, and you can bet that there's going to be, with two older candidates, extremely old candidates relative to historical trends, you can bet that there's going to be some third-party candidate wedged in there that is going to have all kinds of shady foreign help. That's a given. I think, people who do not like America would be stupid not to kind of like prop up a younger third-party candidate who could potentially help Trump. So there's all these things like potentially on the horizon.
Yep.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. We really appreciate your time today. Thank you again for coming on with us. This has been very enlightening.
Yeah, thanks so much, Mike.
And we're going to see what else happens from this, in the aftermath of the Mackey verdict. It is totally possible that we don't see any more charges like this. But I really think that, well, first of all, I think this trial is landmark, whether there are or not. But I think it is very possible that this is kind of the first in a series of things that kind of undo these anti-democracy tactics that we saw in 2016, which is why it's so important to me. Even if he gets 18 months, which is possible, and that's a relatively light sentence in the grand scheme of crime and punishment, this is really important because of the fact that it is the law saying that this is legal.
Yeah, and if he had gotten off, there would have been 10 copycats that would have shown up in 2024 who would have known that, hey, they can get away with this.
Right.
Yep, absolutely. And there may be people who are willing to try it in any case.
Yep. Well, thanks a lot, Mike. We appreciate it.
Hey, it was great talking to you guys. We'll do it again sometime.
Indeed. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Did Nothing Wrong podcast. If you want to hear more, you can go to didnothingwrongpod.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at James, the word 4, and the letter M, all one word, and Grizza BJJ, Grza BJJ, as well as DNW Pod. Thanks again for tuning in, and remember, everyone mentioned did nothing wrong.